great shadow has fallen over the kingdom, as the undead continue to multiply under the control of a dread necromancer. The king's army is broken, the land's overrun, and now the castle has fallen. The last of the kingdom's strength has taken refuge in the hallowed ground of the monastery, where the necromancer and his dead dare not tread, yet. As he tightens his grip on the land and builds his power for a final assault on this last refuge, a few brave souls seek a way to fight back.
Hello, this is Wild One, and for my next playthrough I will be playing Darkest Night by Victory Point Games. Now, a little bit about Victory Point Games. They're known for printing on-demand games, and so they produce them as they're ordered. They use laser cutting to produce the game pieces, and the game boards are usually just like, paper mats, and then they bag them up in a plastic bag and send them out. And then one day they decided to do something revolutionary for Victory Point Games, and that was to produce boxed games. And I believe this was one of the first, if not the first, boxed game that they produced. So let's kind of go into what's in here. I'm going to do a little introduction and then sort of set up the game. As you should have hopefully gathered from the intro, the thing that I love about this game is that the evil forces have already won. So they've defeated the kingdom and wiped it out. And all that's left is this refuge in the monastery where the heroes are basically laying in wait to strategize and figure out how they can defeat this evil necromancer and his forces. The game is a 1 to 4 player game and is fully cooperative, so you can play it solo. However, you always have to play with 4 heroes. Except in the case of, there was one exception, which is that there is a 5-player variant that's in the rules, but I'm not going to go over that in this game. We'll just focus on the 4-player game. I'm sorry, the 4-hero game. So if you play with 2 players, then each one's got to control 2 heroes. If you play with 3, then one of the players has to control 2 heroes, and so on. And of course, if you play solitaire, you play all 4 of the heroes. So let me show you what I've got in here. So once you take the cover off, you'll see it's a generic Victory Point Games box. And you open it up. Now, this is the box for the core game, but I have all of the expansions, including the promo heroes. So there are 4 expansions plus the promo heroes. And I believe 4 promo artifacts as well. But I am only going to play the core game here, so I'm only going to involve the core heroes and the core mechanics of the base game. So here's our instruction book. It's not particularly long. The rules are fairly simple. Hopefully it won't take too long to kind of go over how the game works. Inside here I have a little baggie with all of the artifacts in it, but I've already pulled out the artifacts that came with the base game, so we'll talk about what those are. And then I've got a nice pack of heroes, so these are all the heroes from the core game plus the expansions, except that, again, I've pulled out the heroes already that I'm going to play. So I just kind of wanted to show you that. Underneath here, all these extra baggies. I need to find a use for these baggies. I know I've got other things I can use them for, like Imperial Assault. So inside here, which is interesting, they've provided actually 2 game boards. So one is a kind of a pretty solid paper stock mat of the game board. You see the game board is fairly small. There's not a whole lot to the game board. You have the refuge of the monastery over on the left here. And then you have mountains, village, forest, ruins, swamp, and castle. And those are all the locations in the game that you can travel to. In addition, there is a sort of a puzzle piece style mat, which they laser cut. So it's obviously thicker thicker, stronger material. The only thing I don't like about it is that it's really susceptible to humidity, so I'll probably be playing, rather than playing with this board, like right now it's pretty flat, but that's because I've been keeping it in the box in a low humidity environment. But what will probably happen is that this will start to become warped and these will start to turn up and it'll be unfortunate. So I tend to only use this if I'm in an environment where humidity is not a factor. As you can see, I've got there's a bunch of silica gel packs in here to try and soak up the moisture that gets into the box. So what I'm going to do is let's go ahead and put all this stuff back. Actually, I'm going to keep these little bags out because I think I will have use for these elsewhere. Each one of these comes with a little napkin, and the reason it comes with a little napkin is because I believe it tells you on here, right there, it's called the Wipes a Lot, and you use it to remove any soot that's on my counters or on any of the game pieces, any residual soot. That's because the pieces are laser cut, and when they laser cut them, and you'll get to see all the game pieces here shortly, when they laser cut them, there's a little char in between each piece, so when you push them out of the punch sheet, you'll start to get, a little bit of soot on your fingertips. And you'll probably start to see soot on my fingertips while we're playing the game because there's quite a bit of soot still out there. But that's, I think, the only real downside. It's not a big downside. Your fingers get a little bit dirty. You don't really pass the soot on everywhere else. So we're going to set this all aside. So first thing you might notice is that there's this track at the bottom. This is the darkness track. This game is essentially a guerrilla warfare game. Basically, this is it. It's our last hope. So the game starts here in the monastery. The Necromancer starts over here in the ruins. Here's the Necromancer. Just having a little trouble getting it to focus. And there's the laser cutting, where you can see that there's a little soot on the side there. It gets a little black on the fingers, but he sits here in the ruins. I've already pre-chosen my heroes. There are 9 to choose from in the base game. I have chosen to use the knight, the priest, the wizard. I decided to go with this druid because the druid's pretty cool. He's pretty powerful. The back of these hero sheets has a quick reference. So I grabbed another hero sheet from one of the other remaining heroes. In this case it was the seer. So I'm just grabbing one of the other hero sheets to use the back so that we can reference the hero turn and the actions. What's missing from here is the Necromancer's actions, which are on the back of this book. So the back of the instruction book has a nice quick reference guide to what the Necromancer does, what the different items are, what holy relics are, what blights are, when I talk about blights, other types of searching results. So like I said, it's a guerrilla warfare game, so you're actively trying to hide from the Necromancer's presence. You don't want the Necromancer to see you. So there are 2 forms of measurement attached to each of these heroes. And those forms of measurement are grace and secrecy. So grace is your hero's ability to survive an encounter that would otherwise kill, a normal person. And secrecy, you could almost consider this like hit points, basically. So when you have no grace and you encounter something that attacks you and presumably could kill you, it does kill you when you have 0 grace. Secrecy is how well hidden you are from the Necromancer and his minions, his forces. His forces, or minions, or whatever you wish to call them, come in the form of blights. Blights can be abstract and they can be kind of concrete. So you can have a blight, for example, called confusion. And then you can have like skeletons. So you can hurt skeletons. Now, the heroes, so the wizard here, he has a starting grace of 3 and a starting secrecy of 5. The priest has a starting grace of 6 and a starting secrecy of 6. Makes him pretty solid, doesn't it? The knight has a starting grace of 5 and a starting secrecy of 6, and the druid has the same. So the one who basically is more likely to suffer death is the wizard. The rest of these folks are pretty solid on their grace. You might argue that the wizard, his grace is lower because he practices the dark arts, and therefore he's not in tune with whatever religious or spiritual system exists in this world. Of course, that's why the priest has the highest grace right now at 6. So we mark the grace and secrecy with these little tokens. So I'm going to go ahead and put the grace and secrecy markers on all 4 of these heroes. Now that we have our heroes starting grace and secrecy marked here, we need to put their miniatures in the monastery. So here is the druid in the monastery. We have us here, the priest, into the monastery. We have our knight in the monastery, and we have our wizard. And then one more thing, there's the darkness track marker. This darkness track will advance, and things get worse for us as the darkness continues to advance. I have these 4 tokens here. These are sun tokens, and on the back is a moon token. So this says these represent day and night. So each round of play is 2 phases. There's a day phase and a night phase. The heroes get to perform their actions during the day phase, so they each get one of these. When a hero has performed his or her action, you flip this over. On each round, the heroes can choose to move in any order they wish, so you can change how things go from round to round. So what else sets these heroes apart from each other? Well, those come in the form of power cards. So each hero has a set of 10 of these power cards. Each hero gets to start with 3 powers, but they can't start with any 3 powers. They can only start with powers out of the deck that have this symbol in the upper right corner. So they get to pick from 3 of these 4 powers to start with. For the wizard, I'd like to choose teleport. I'm going to choose lightning strike, and I believe I'm going to choose invisibility. And as we use these, I'll explain what these are. And then with the remaining one, it goes in the wizard's power deck, and then we shuffle the power deck to draw from later. So the heroes do have the opportunity later to potentially earn additional powers. So I'm going to set the wizard deck. We'll just set it up here. Priest, same deal. He's got 4 abilities here, and then 6 that he can't choose from, so he has to choose 3 of these. I'm going to choose Sanctuary, which is a good one. Benediction is a good one. So for Benediction, a hero at your location gains a grace up to their default grace. And if they now have more grace than you gain a grace. So it's actually sort of beneficial for the priest to be a little low on grace, because it gives the priest an opportunity to regain grace by giving grace to somebody else. And then we have intercession, which is whenever a hero at your location loses or spends grace, they may spend your grace instead. I really like intercession as well. It ties really well with benediction. So I think we're going to pick those 3, and we're going to take this blessing of faith, and we're going to shuffle it in with these other powers. As you might guess, the other 6 powers, I would argue, should be in general more powerful than the 4 powers that you have to choose from at the beginning. That would seem to make sense. which is why they stand out. And we'll put the priest's power deck there. The knight starts with, let's see, I'm definitely picking Hard Ride. I'll explain why these are nice to have later. So we have an Oath of Purging. The knight has these oaths where he can only have one of these oaths active at a time. This one in particular, you can activate this oath and then add 2 dice to fights. Sprinting, I like the eluding with 2 dice. And charge, I like the fighting with 2 dice. I think we're going to save the oath for later. But you can see there's 4 other oaths. There's 3 other oaths here besides that oath of purging. Knight deck there, and our druid. Our druid has an animal companion. We're definitely picking the animal companion. Why would we not? Camouflage, it allows you to elude. And we'll talk about fighting and eluding and defending later as we get into the game. Visions, exhaust after you draw an event card to discard it with that effect. This is a really good one too, when we talk about events. And by we, I mean the royal we. Just me. Just me. Put the druid's deck there. We have a couple more decks to talk about. We have the event deck. At the start of each round, actually at the start of each hero's turn in each round, they need to draw an event card from this deck. Unless they're in the monastery, then they don't. Or if they're in the same location as the Necromancer and their secrecy is 0, which means the Necromancer can see them, and the Necromancer will attack them. Rather than you having to draw an event, you have to defend yourself against the Necromancer. And defending yourself against the Necromancer is really hard. He's not easy to defend against. He's also very difficult to kill. The objective of the heroes in this game is to either kill the Necromancer or obtain 3 holy relics and return them to the or bring them to the monastery. And you'll see there are these marks here for relics, and there will be 4 relics on the board to attempt to collect. Now, it's not as easy as just going to those locations and picking up the relics. The relics are locked in a chest, and the chest requires 3 keys to open it. So you have to obtain 3 keys before you're able to unlock the chest and acquire the relic. And once you've acquired a relic and you're carrying it around with you, it kind of makes you dangerous. You don't move as well. You become more visible. It's not good. Let's just say it's not good. So I'm going to put the event deck here. We have a deck called the map deck. The map deck is responsible for determining where to place blights on the board when that time comes in the round, and also what the outcome of a search is. So in each of these locations, you can search or conduct a search as an action. And the difficulty of the search is based on what's listed here. So the search difficulty of the swamp is 4, the castle is 2, the lowest search difficulty is in the castle, the village is 3, the ruins are 4, the forest is 4, and the mountains are 4. And as you can see here in the monastery, you cannot search in the monastery. So we're going to shuffle this map deck up here. The difficulty is the die roll you have to reach. So you have to roll that value or higher to succeed at a search in that location. So for example, the castle, you only have to roll a 2 or higher on a d6. I think these are sufficiently shuffled. We'll put the map deck over here. Actually, there's enough space. I think I'm going to put, oops, I'm going to put the event deck over here. And then put the map deck over here as well. So we now need to place the relics. So these are the relics. And like I was talking about, you can see that it's a chest with 3 keyholes in it. You have to acquire 3 keys to unlock this chest and open it. And you obtain a holy relic. And they are here, 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 and over here in the ruins where the Necromancer is currently, where he starts the game. One other deck that I was going to show you is the artifact deck. It's a really small deck of 6 cards in the base game. So we only have these 6 artifacts. These are really, really powerful cards. They're also a challenge to get. So it's difficult to obtain an artifact. We're going to shove that over here. We're hardly going to ever touch it, so we'll just shove it off over here. For each location, it actually tells you what are probably the most common items you would find at that location. And for the mountains, you will most commonly find either a key or a treasure chest. And a treasure chest is something that you can acquire and then discard the treasure chest at any time to draw a new power card. So this is one way that you can acquire additional powers. In the forest, it's the same, key or a treasure chest. In the castle over here, it's a treasure chest or a supply cache. Supply cache is really cool. With the supply cache, you get to draw 2 power cards from your power deck and then choose one of the power cards to keep. And then the other one you place at the bottom of your deck of power cards. The swamp, you're most commonly going to find an epiphany. An epiphany is even better because with an epiphany, you get to grab your power deck, pick any power you want out of that deck and take it out of the deck and reshuffle it. Really awesome to get an epiphany. So the swamp is the only place where you can find epiphanies. And then the other item that you might commonly find there is bottled magic. There's a little bottle right there. With the bottled magic, you can discard after a fight roll to add 3 dice to that roll. So if you, for example, were in a fight, since you can do this after the roll, so if the roll was a failure and you had bottled magic, you could choose to use it to greatly increase the chances of you winning that fight. Now that's only for fight rolls. There are also elude rolls, which you can't use the bottled magic for. The ruins, you can see there are 2 keys there, which means you're most likely to find keys at the ruins. The ruins are the best place to go to try to find keys. The village only has 1 icon, which is the treasure chest. And like I said before, that's just the one that you discard to draw a new power card. And all of this information is on the back of the guide. All this quick reference stuff that's here, and this explains the holy relics. So a little bit about the holy relics. When you have a holy relic, you can add 1 to your highest die roll when fighting. And then you lose a secrecy at the start of your turn. You lose a secrecy if you receive it from another hero. So this is where you can actually pass holy relics around. One of the things that you can do that doesn't require an action is that if there's more than 1 hero in the area, the heroes can freely trade items at any time they want, even during combat. So, and I would say combat includes eluding. That's how I would interpret it. So at any time, without spending an action, you can exchange items. The problem with the holy relic, though, is that if you exchange it with somebody, if you receive it from somebody else, you have to lose a secrecy. And then each hero can only carry 1 relic at a time. So, like I said, the 2 goals, the 2 potential wins for the heroes are either to carry 3 relics back to the monastery or kill the Necromancer. Well, the Necromancer requires a die roll of 7 to kill. You're rolling a d6. How are you supposed to roll a 7 on a d6? Well, that's where the relic comes in. Since the relic adds 1 to your highest die roll, if you roll a 6 and you're holding a relic, you've rolled a 7 and you've killed the Necromancer. Now there's a caveat to that, which is that if you're in the location with the Necromancer and there are any blights in that location, you basically cannot fight the Necromancer. You have to fight a blight at that location. You're unable to fight the Necromancer directly. And then here are all the blights listed here, so we can talk about those as we put them out on the board, which is basically the last step here before we get started. The last step is populating the realm with blights. So we're going to be placing a blight in every location to start the game. And the way we do that is we draw the top card off of the map deck, and the first column here tells us what blights to place in each location. So in the mountains, we're going to place skeletons. There are the skeletons. In the castle, we're going to place a shroud. The shroud is an abstract blight, like I was talking about before. In the village, we're going to place corruption. In the swamp, we're going to place shades. In the forest, we're going to place a lich. Or a lich. I call it a lich. It's easier to just say lich. And then the ruins, we're going to place a dark fog. And then the monastery lists one. Well, you can't place blights in the monastery, so why would this be here? So there is another rule that indicates that if there are 4 blights in any of these locations, and you are required to place a 5th blight there, you must place that blight in the monastery. So I've talked about the win conditions, let's talk about the lose conditions. The lose conditions are if the heroes get wiped out, game's over, you lost. The other lose condition is if there are 4 blights in the monastery and you are required to place a 5th blight in the monastery. You lose the game. The Necromancer has broken through the spiritual barrier that's protecting the monastery, and that is the last bastion of hope in the kingdom, and it's wiped out. And the heroes lose. So then this becomes part of the discard pile for the map deck. I'll just put it on the bottom face up here. Let's talk a little bit about the blights and how this works. There's a little corner, there's a number in the corner here. I don't usually pay any attention to the corner because it's really, what's important is on the back here. So what this explains is these 2 numbers here are the die roll you must make in order to defend against these skeletons when they attack. And this is the die roll you must make to elude these skeletons from attacking you, basically hiding from them. This is a guerrilla warfare game, basically. And then here's the fail condition based on this, based on whether you attempted to defend or elude. And the fail condition is you die. Little skull and crossbones there. But you have grace. As long as you have grace, you don't die. You just lose 1 grace. The bottom here, the 2 big ones, the 5 and the skull and crossbones, that's if you attack the skeletons. So if you take an attack action, you have to roll a 5 or higher to beat the skeletons. And if you fail the attack, if you roll 1 through 4, then you die. Or if you have grace, then you lose 1 grace. Some of these blights have other types of effects on them, like the abstract ones. The shroud, for example, there is no defending or eluding the shroud. It just protects blights at that location. So what that means is that you can't fight any other blights at that location until you defeat this shroud. Corruption. Some of the power cards provide bonuses. When you're in the location with the corruption blight, you don't get to use your bonuses in that location. And then you'll notice down here, the fail condition, if you attack it, is that you exhaust all your powers, which really sucks. Exhausting your power means that we're either going to like turn it sideways or place it face down. I probably would just place it face down. You can restore those powers, and we'll talk about how that works when we get into what a hero's turn looks like and what action options a hero has. Dark Fog here. The Dark Fog adds 2 to your search difficulty. So the runes right now have a search difficulty of 4. So now, because of the Dark Fog, the search difficulty is 6, requiring you to roll a 6. And you lose a turn if you attack them and fail. That's not good. The Lich, or Lich, this is the one I'm talking about. I don't really like this one very much because he is a tough cookie. He is 5 across the board. 5 to defend against, 5 to elude, 5 to kill. And the one I don't think we looked at was the Shades. The Shades are actual physical blights, so they're actually very easy to defend against and very hard to elude against. And this is where you make up your decision about whether you want to defend against them or elude them, based on these numbers and based on your particular powers. And like I was saying, maybe you can't really see yet, but I'm starting to develop a little bit of black soot on my hands. Alright, so the game is set up and ready to go. So let's talk about, just briefly, before I end this first part of the playthrough, let's talk about the hero's turn and the actions they have available to them. Like I said, one round, the heroes can go in any order they wish. So I could start with the druid, and then do the priest, wizard, knight, and then on the next round I could do priest, knight, wizard, druid, whatever I want to do. The hero's turn, like I said, here's the quick reference. So I'm going to read through what the hero's turn entails. So, when the hero takes a turn, at the start of that turn, you lose a secrecy if the Necromancer is in your location. You lose a secrecy if you're carrying a holy relic. And then, if you have any start of turn instructions on your power cards, then you resolve those. Then the next step is the event step. And we briefly talked about that. If you're in the monastery, you do not take the event step. If the Necromancer is present in your location and your secrecy is 0, meaning you are visible to the Necromancer, then you have to defend against him, either by defending against his attack or attempting to elude him. And of course, defending against his attack requires a 7. And you can't roll a 7 unless you have a relic, or unless you have a card. I believe there might be a few power cards that add 1 to your result. The other thing to pay attention to is what it says you can do. So like invisibility says +2 when eluding. That's +2 dice, not +2 added to your roll. Or here like fight with 2 dice. So those are how that works. If there's no dice there, if it says +2 when eluding, that means you get to add 2 to your die roll. And you only need 1 success. So you get to roll multiple dice, like I said here, invisibility +2 and eluding. So you normally only get to roll, you always get to roll at least a minimum of 1 die, whether you fight, defend, or elude. You can get bonus, you can get additional dice, like here with invisibility, you get, in this case the wizard would get 3 to elude if he used this. So, with 3 dice, all you have to do is roll 1 success on one of those dice. The dice are not additive, they're just giving you additional opportunities to succeed. So, if you don't have to deal with the Necromancer in the event step, then you draw an event card. The event card is usually something unexpected you have to deal with, like some enemy that's in the area and you might have to fight or elude it, or based on your secrecy, you might have to do something, or you might have to face something stronger if you're lower on secrecy. Kind of the same thing with grace. We'll get to see kind of what those events are as we draw them. Then finally the action phase. The action phase is the big one. You can only perform 1 action during your action phase. A lot of games that have action phases usually let you perform 2 actions, or more even. This only lets you perform 1 action for your turn. This is a little bit crippling for this game, and I think some people probably criticize it for having this, but It does add to the challenge of the game. But your actions, of only one you can choose. One is travel, which means moving to an adjacent location. There are roads on the map here. So you move to one adjacent location, that's all you can do. When you move to another location, you're doing it in a stealthy manner, so you get to gain a secrecy. But there's a cap on it, which is 5. So for example, the druid has 6 secrecy. So if he were to move, he can't gain a secrecy to 7 because he's above 5. So if he was at 4 secrecy, he could gain 1 and get to 5. Attacking, so if you're in the same location as a blight, or more than one blight, choose a blight to fight, or the necromancer, to try to destroy it. The act of fighting causes you to lose a secrecy. You're out in the open. You have revealed yourself and are actively fighting something. So it increases your awareness. As a result, you lose the secrecy. Search. So this is where you roll against the search difficulty that's on each of those locations. And if you succeed, you draw one map card per success. So in this case, if you get to roll multiple dice to search and you roll multiple successes, you get to draw more than one of those map cards. Now you only get to choose one, though. That's the caveat here. Is like, say, if you were able to choose 2 map cards, you would look at the region that's the second column that was on the card. The first column was the blights, and the second column was the search results. So you'd only get to choose one of those for that location. Praying. Now you can only pray when you're in the monastery. If you go to the monastery, if you're in the monastery and you pray, you get to roll 2 dice. And for each 3 or higher that you roll, so you get a 2 out of 3 chance here, you get to gain a secrecy, you get to gain a grace up to your default. So if you have 2 grace, and you roll 2 successes, you're up to 4 grace, but only up to your default. So for example, our poor wizard over here has a default grace of 3. He can't go higher than 3 when he prays. And the more important part here is the part after that, which is refreshing your powers. So when you pray, you get to refresh your powers. So when you've exhausted your powers, you can't reuse them unless you pray. And the same thing with hide. I might not have mentioned this. I don't recall mentioning this. Hide's important because you can do that anywhere. You just can't regain grace. So it's just like pray, except that in addition to refreshing your powers like you can at the monastery, you can gain 1 secrecy up to 5. So it caps at 5, just like travel does. So praying at the monastery or hiding allows you to refresh any exhausted powers. Then retrieving a holy relic. So if you're at the location of a holy relic and you have 3 keys in your inventory, discard the 3 keys and take the relic. And then you have to abide by the restraints that the relic puts on you. And then finally, power. Any power card that has an action effect on it, which means that the power card provides a special action beyond these normal actions. So any action effect from a power card, you can choose that. And that's the end of that part. So once all the heroes have done their business and they've all flipped their cards to the night side, it is then the night phase. In the night phase, things get interesting. So this is when the Necromancer gets to act. So the first thing that happens is we move the darkness track up by 1. And for each desecration blight, desecration looks like this. It's a particularly ugly looking thing. But on the back side, it tells you that it increases your darkness track by 1 for each round. So for each desecration blight that's on the board, you also have to increase by 1. So for example, if there are 2 desecration blights in 2 different locations or in the same location or whatever, then you increase by 3 instead of 1. Then for movement, you roll 1 die, this is for the Necromancer, and you compare it to all the hero's secrecy values. If any hero has a secrecy value that's lower than the result, so if he rolls a 4, then any hero with a secrecy of 3 or less is visible to to the Necromancer unless they're in the monastery. And then the Necromancer, as a result of that, if he does see any heroes, he will move one space toward the closest hero that he detected. So if he detects more than one hero, then if there are two heroes, he can choose. The players get to choose where he moves. Now, if he doesn't detect any heroes, then he follows the numbers that are on the board, and it might be a little hard to see, but there are these little die numbers here in each of these locations, except the monastery. So, for example, like I said, if he rolled a 4, there's a 4 right there. And if he's in the ruins at the time, he stays in the ruins. So 4 or a 6, he stays in the ruins. If he rolled a 1, then he travels over to the forest, but only if he didn't detect a hero. And here's 3, 5, and then over here is 2. So each of these locations has this. Either he moves to another location or he might stay put. So there are places where he can stay put, like the mountains, the forest, the ruins, the castle, and the swamp. The village, he's always moving out from the village. Actually, no. There we go. Or he stays in the village on 6. And then we produce blights. So now that he's moved, we need to create a blight, a new blight in his location. By doing that, you draw a map card and look at that location and look in that first column and pick that blight and place it in the Necromancer's location. Now, there are darkness effects that can create extra blights. So also kind of hard to read on this track probably is that there is a thing, there's a note here that if the darkness is 10 or higher, then you need to create 2 blights if the Necromancer's location has no blights. And then over here, if the darkness level reaches 20 or higher, then you need to create an extra blight when the movement die is a 1 or a 2. But you still have to also follow this one, so these are cumulative. So 10 or higher, you follow this rule. 20 or higher, you add this rule. And then finally, 25 or higher, all blights have +1 might. The might is, I believe, the fighting ability. And then finally, if you get to 30, all the way to 30, if anything raises the darkness further, then you create a blight at the monastery instead. So this is where it becomes possible for blights to enter the monastery without having accumulated a bunch of blights in one location and being forced to put a 5th blight in a location. Let's not get to 30. Let's hopefully within 30 rounds I will have either won or lost this game. This is a bit of a challenging game. I've never played the core game by itself. When I bought Darkest Night, the first 2 expansions were already out, so I bought the first 2 expansions with it and would play with the first 2 expansions. So I've never played this, just the core game. So it'll be interesting to see how well I fare in the core game. So that kind of wraps up setup and sort of an overview of what a round looks like, what a hero's turn looks like, and what actions they have available to them, and what the Necromancer does during the evening before dawn comes again. So after all of that is complete, everybody flips their little discs back to the sun side, and you start the next round. That's it for now. Next video I will start round 1 and we'll get into this and see how well things go and see if we can fight back the darkness and defeat this Necromancer and hopefully recover from his victory and save ourselves from complete annihilation. So until next time, this is Wild One signing off.